it really is such a radical position. I mean, it almost shocks the conscious to think that someone would call abortion a superpower. Most people think it's a last resort, but if anybody's going to do it, it's the people who are shouting their abortion unabashedly.
So Scott, you know how I love to read?
Yeah.
I'm always reading like good books, like classic books, whatever. I was reading about this new book.
I read a book one time. Yeah.
You read one? Yeah, good. I'm proud of you, Scott. I was reading about this one that I don't think I'm going to read. Usually it's like, don't judge a book by its cover or whatever. I am judging harshly this book by its cover. It's called Abortion is Everything. And
it's got to be for like adults and older people, right?
one would think, no. So in fact, it doesn't tell anything really about abortion. And it was written for 5 to 8-year-olds. Because when I think who needs to understand abortion, I think
Right.
those little kids, those are the ones who need to know.
Yeah. It's scary. But fortunately, there are people out there talking about what a just sham it is, and it's just a really, really shame that they've got this out here for kids. Nicole Hunt is the attorney and life issues specialist for Focus on the Family. She wrote a great piece about this, and she is the one who joins us today here on Dear Jane. So, Nicole, thanks for joining us today. What do you think is the point in writing a book like this?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the book is targeted to 5 to 8-year-olds, titled Abortion is Everything. And the clear objective is to try to win over the hearts and the minds of kids. What we know as parents and folks who are looking at the education system is that kids are learning their moral framework at that age. They're learning right from wrong. And when you put abortion into a framework of abortion is a superpower, there's messaging there that is trying to convey moral truth to kids, that abortion is okay, that abortion enables us to chase our dreams. And of course, we know that's not true, but it's clearly about trying to indoctrinate kids on the issue of abortion.
So I'm never going to buy the book. We're never going to buy the book. So have you read it? You can give us a summary of kind of what it's about.
So it's a 36-page book, and I also did not want to buy the book. I did not want to put my money towards. By the way, it's written by the same folks who are the Shout Your Abortion organization. So they are very defiantly, not just pro-choice, very, very pro-abortion. So, but I can tell you what I've been able to look at online, those who have read it and who have shared it, that they define abortion as a superpower. They suggest that the way to get to your dreams is sometimes by having to make hard choices. And I can't forget the picture I saw when I was doing research into this book. The way that they tried to describe the difference between someone who has a baby versus someone who has a miscarriage and then someone who has an abortion. Here's the picture that they had. There's a hand that's holding on to a string that has a balloon attached at the end. And for describing what it looks like to keep your baby, to have a baby, that hand just keeps holding on to the string. And it says, this is when you have your baby. And they described an abortion or a miscarriage as when the hand's holding on to the string, but the balloon deflates. And finally, they illustrated a miscarriage or an abortion as a woman holding on to that string, but she lets it go and the balloon just flies away. And that was supposed to be the picture that demonstrated what an abortion is. It was just not just shocking to the conscious, but honestly, just so untruthful. That is not at all what an abortion is. It's not just letting go of a balloon and watching it fly away, hoping that, the balloon has a great adventure or travels. I mean, it's a baby's life. It's a living human being that's life is being ended. And so the idea that that's how they're demonstrating what murder is, because at the end of the day, that's what abortion is. It is the intentional taking of a life, which is murder, is not just shocking on the issue of abortion, but shocking on any other issue. You could not apply that same logic to to a baby that has been born 5 minutes later. And yet the abortion industry would minimize life in that way. It's shocking, and it's really, truly disgusting.
So, despite the book's title, Abortion is Everything, it sounds like we learn almost nothing about abortion in this book. Do they get into any specifics, or what are the key things that they're leaving out that if you're going to talk to kids as young as 5 to 8 about abortion, that kids should understand about abortion that the book leaves out?
Yeah, what it leaves out is biological reality. What really happens when a mom gets pregnant? And I think a lot of kids these days, with the advancement of science and having siblings and things like that, there's a lot more out there about what is happening in the womb. And so it's exciting to see it. We've seen other books. Live Action is an organization who has an entire book about like the reality of biology, of what it means to be a human and to start from the moment of conception and fertilization. And what does it mean when the heartbeat starts? How about when growth happens? How about when movement begins, or when that baby can start to feel pain, or when they start to move around and the mom can feel the flutters in her stomach? All of those biological truths that are based in science are not at all part of the conversation. And instead, the focus is on just personal autonomy. What matters to me about how I want to pursue life? That's all that matters when I'm thinking about whether or not an abortion is a good choice or a bad choice. And sadly, that framework, I mean, it's not only anti-science, it's just not true. It's not only about how is this going to impact me. You take that same logic and you apply it to a baby outside of the womb. Babies require a lot of work. They require constant care. And so it's not just about what's easiest for you as a person. It's about what's the right thing to do. What's the moral framework here? And ultimate to all of that, of course, is the truth that where do humans begin? They begin at that point of fertilization. And it is simply a path along the way that they become even more developed. And if humans don't begin at that point of fertilization, the truth is that there's no other feasible, logical place that you could say, oh, that's when it begins. Because even outside of the womb, these babies are very dependent on mom and on dad to take care of them. And that is part of how we are designed. It's beautiful, and it's an important component that abortion activists like to leave out, that these babies, they are human from that point of fertilization.
You said something interesting earlier about this is the age where we start to build our moral foundation. But on the other hand, I got to think, what could these kids actually really understand? We're talking 5 to 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, what do we know about our level of comprehension at that age of such things?
Yeah, well, we know, all we have to do is simply look at like the kind of instruction kids are getting in the classroom. Let's look to kindergarteners, right? That's the age that 5 years old, a lot of kids are starting kindergarten. They're learning about what it means to not only be a good student, but to be a good friend, to be a good classmate. They're learning about boundaries of how they interact with others in a respectful way, respecting their teachers, respecting their friends, being kind, sitting quietly and listening to others. These are all very important things that are building blocks, right? Not just for what does it mean to be a good human, but what does it mean to have a healthy family? What does it mean to have a strong society? A strong nation. These are the building blocks. And so when we dehumanize humans at their smallest forms, we really are compromising one of the most basic, fundamental foundations of what it means to know about treating others with dignity and with respect, and most important, the most vulnerable in our society, which of course are preborn babies and babies just outside of the womb. Absolutely the most vulnerable, and they need that protection.
Mm-hmm. It's striking to me, just as we think about these two books, the pro-life book that you mentioned that Live Action has put together, and then this one, the different picture of the world that it paints. One is, like you said, based in biological reality. It tells a beautiful story. It tells about the different things that are happening as life develops. And the other one is just not even being honest about what it's purporting to say. So it's the complete opposite. It's like, so is this a book for kids about life ending? And I'm sure that there are age appropriate books about grief. And I think about, like, for a sibling whose mom is maybe going through a miscarriage, like there being helpful books to help them kind of think through that. But for this book to compare or even insinuate that abortion would be similar to a miscarriage, that same type of, maybe there's a little bit of grief, but it's just a moving on. It makes me curious, are parents eager to teach, like even liberal parents, even maybe parents that agree with abortion, are they eager to read books like this to their kids? Like, who's excited about this?
Not people in my circle, but it is interesting as I've been researching it and then also just looking at comments and seeing how people are interacting with that book. The folks who believe that abortion really is some empowering superpower think that this is going to, shake off shame or allow people to make decisions that are in their best interest rather than feeling forced by societal standards to have to, carry a pregnancy to term and have a baby. But, I think that there's from what I could tell based on reactions on comment threads, and then of course in my own personal life, that really is the minority. I feel like that is a very radical abortion position. I think what I've seen for Focus on the Family, as I've been spending more time studying not just these types of cultural engagements, but also the abortion amendments that we've seen passing across the country. What we see is that you have real radical abortion leftists, and then on the right, you have the pro-life movement who is strong and continuing to advocate for life. And then you have a lot of people in the middle who are just not sure. And so I think these kind of books really do start to come off as much more radical. The people in the middle don't really think that abortion is a superpower. They think that maybe sometimes it's a last resort and that they are uncomfortable with saying women can't get it, which is why we're seeing a lot of abortion amendments pass that are making it a constitutional protection. I disagree with those. Of course, Focus on the Family does as well, because we believe that all human life is worthy of protection, and that human dignity, that being made in the image of God, that begins at the moment of fertilization, at the moment of conception. And so we've been advocating against those amendments. But I think what we've seen as we've been looking at the polling and just looking at why did people vote in support of this, a lot of them, they think maybe it needs to be there just in case, and maybe they feel uncomfortable by taking it away altogether. But what's represented in these books is like a very affirming position that this is the way that you can achieve self-autonomy and make your dreams come true. And that is a very radical position that I don't think most Americans believe is true.
Yeah, that's a good point. You've got, if producer Kate has served us well, you have 4 children. I've got 2 children. They're old, so. But I was trying to think, okay, I never really talked to them. I never sat them down and said, okay, boys, now let's talk about abortion. We never had that intention. I mean, I'm sure there were comments made along the way. What about you? I mean, what thoughts do you have for a good way to broach this subject with kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. We were motivated to have the discussion with our children probably closer to the end of elementary school-ish, so maybe like 5th or 6th grade. And when we started the conversation, we said, that we're Christians, and we believe that every single person's made in God's image. And that begins from the very moment that God makes you in your mom's belly. And we went to, Psalm 139 to talk about that. And I want to mention, as I bring this point up, that our oldest, we have a daughter, and then we have 3 sons, and then we had 4 kids in 4 years. It was a very busy season of life. Our oldest, she just turned 17, but she was born extremely premature. I had a medical condition that required her immediate delivery, and she was only at the very end of the 2nd trimester, beginning of the 3rd. She was 27 weeks gestation out of the full 40 that it takes to grow a baby. And so when she was born, she weighed 1 pound, 9 ounces. And we literally just celebrated her birthday last weekend. And it always is such a great celebration of life. But I bring it up because to see her fighting for her life in the NICU, in that little incubator, every single day, her super delicate skin, very translucent. She was about the size of a 24-week baby. And to see her and her fight to want to live. For us, we were always pro-life, but when you see it outside of the womb, in front of your own eyes, it is a totally different experience. These babies, they have a will and a desire to have their own life. And so anyway, so we watched her grow in the NICU and brought her home, sweetest home, sweet home reunion. But when we talk to them about that, and of course they know their sister's story, and she knows her own story, but we tell them, life begins at that very moment when that fertilization happens. And we believe that because our faith tells us that it's true. The Bible tells us that it's true. But we've also seen it. We've seen it played out right in front of us. And then we just say, but sadly, there are moms out there that when they have that baby in their belly, they think they're either scared and they think that they can't do it. Or sometimes they don't want to have that baby, and they'll go to a doctor, and that doctor will kill the baby. And I remember the first time we talked to the kids about this, they were just like, what? You didn't even need to tell them, and it's wrong. Right. They were just shocked. And it's a part of natural law, because it's like a mom would choose to go to a doctor to hurt the baby? Why would she do that? And so then we started talking more as they got a little bit older. We would talk more about why, and we would talk specifically about the fact that sometimes in secular society, they don't have the same values. And this is why it's important as Christians that we live out our faith publicly, that we're not afraid to say what we believe and why we believe, and to bring that into a public conversation, because that's how hearts and minds can be changed. And I told them, I was like, you're probably at some point, now they're older, I've got 2 in high school and now 2 in middle school, but we'll have back and forths, and we'll say, we'll say that this is a life and that life begins in the womb, and then the other side will say, but it's only a clump of cells. And again, they'll be like, but why would they say it's only a clump of cells? And we just go back and forth. My husband and I we're both philosophy majors in college, and so we don't mind having those conversations where we're really we want them to struggle through the question too, but in a guided way, always informed by the truth that we are made in God's image. And that even if you're a Christian or even if you're not a Christian who's just looking at this from more of a secular worldview, when do human rights begin? If they don't begin in the womb, what would be a reasonable reason for beginning at any other time? And so having, and also, leaning into the fact that in America, we really do believe in the pursuit of happiness and in our ability to be able to live our life, that life is a right that all Americans should have the opportunity to pursue. So just having those conversations with them in a broad context, but definitely beginning where our faith is and why it matters to us as Christians, and that sometimes that means we live counterculturally. We live, and in fact, after I had my daughter, the doctors were like, well, there's a more than 50% chance that you are probably going to have the same condition again. And we were lucky that we saved you and the baby, because my organs were failing. It was like, we've got to get her out in order to save your life. And by the way, I'll mention that it wasn't, we have to let the baby go in order to save your life. It was, we can save her and we can save you. And this was one of those classic situations where, you want to save mom's life. And in this case, the doctors were like, this has already happened once. There's probably a really good chance it's going to happen with more babies. You might really want to consider not having any more kids. And, Jeff and I, we talked to each other and we're like, well, that's not happening. God has called us to be fruitful and multiply. And so, not letting fear control that narrative, I think, is also very important for women. Whether you're looking at an unplanned pregnancy or you're looking at unexpected health consequences during your pregnancy, it's very important that we are, as women, are making decisions out of love and out of empowerment and out of a sound mind, not making them out of fear. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful for pregnancy resource centers and churches who are willing to step in that gap and walk alongside women who are in an uncertain place. Because unfortunately, there's a lot out there, a lot of groups and organizations that would say, if there's any complication,
Right.
well, you should probably just do what's best for you. And it gets back to, no, actually, we're called to do the right thing. And yes, we have to weigh all the consequences, but you don't just do what's in your own self-interest. You do what the right thing is to do.
That's amazing that you're able to see this from a few different angles, because it sounds like you've been that woman who's in that, life-threatening situation that they always talk about, where it's like, oh, well, of course you have to have an abortion. And so I think it's great that your doctors were not forcing that, but you can also probably empathize with the woman who is in that situation and whose doctors are really pressuring her, even if that's not what she wants, even if she wants to continue the pregnancy. So I think you have a powerful story, on your own to be able to speak to women in that situation. One last interesting thing I think about this book is, as I was trying to research it more and figure out, like, how do I want like a summary of this. I thought it's interesting. It's not on Amazon.
Nope.
It's not on, like, you can't go to any major like bookseller websites. Because I was really curious. I wanted to read reviews of it. So I went to their Instagram and I saw people commenting about like, oh, I'm so glad this is available. But I wanted to see what real people thought about it after they read it. And I think it's interesting just that they don't have it listed anywhere where you could purchase it and then people could leave the reviews. But it sounds like that's maybe intentional. What do you think?
No, that's a very good point. I think you're right. And I was even trying to find, I wonder if anybody has just gotten the book and read it, on YouTube or, posted a video of all the things that it has to say. And they haven't, or if they have, they've been taken down. I don't know. But you're right. And I think it just gets back to the point that it really is such a radical position. I mean, it almost shocks the conscious to think that someone would call abortion a superpower. Most people think it's a last resort. But if anybody's going to do it, it's the people who are shouting their abortion unabashedly. And I just think it's also not true for a lot of women who do have abortions and come to regret it. And many pregnancy help organizations are out there to come alongside women who have had the abortions and they do regret it. And they live with that regret every single day and they have to come to terms with it. And so it's a rejection of the truth about a lot of women's stories when it comes to their experience with abortion. It wasn't a superpower. It was something that they chose in a moment of fear that they came to regret later.
You mentioned Shout Your Abortion. The people behind, the woman behind this is one of the authors of this book. And if you do just a modicum of research into the two women who are listed as the authors of this book, they're really pieces of work. And it drives home the point you were making that this is all about indoctrination. Because if you look at any of the stuff that they've done, I mean, there's one here that's written by this Amelia Bono or whatever, how you say her last name. And she's the Shout Your Abortion woman. But she has her story of having an abortion, and it's obscenity laced. But, there's quotes in there like, I remember this experience with nothing but gratitude. And then, she just goes on, just sort of, you could tell she's just a really, really bitter person. But there's this with one line that just stuck out to me. When she found out that she was pregnant, she took the test and she set it down on the coffee table and lit a cigarette.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and then the other woman who, Rachel Kessler, Again, you just look at the things that they have written over the years, and they're all, I mean, they're very, very bitter ladies. I mean, it's just incredible. Think of the stereotypes of some of these women that you think of, and these two women are there. But you can tell this is just about trying to influence young hearts and minds. That's what
Yeah,
this is.
trying to normalize abortion for the next generation. And I think, I mean, I always say you got to call out the evil, and then I think I know women who have been involved. I'm on the Pro-Life Colorado board for Colorado, and I'm on the board with a doctor who was an abortionist. She performed abortions until one day God removed the scales from her eyes, and she realized what she was doing was evil and wrong. And it was in the middle of a procedure, actually. And she said she had to finish the procedure, the abortion, and she put her tools down. She walked out of the room and she left it for good. And so I would say too that nobody is too far from the hand of God. And, now that we know these two authors' names, and we know just how sad their life stories are.
Really, they are.
They should be at the top of all of our prayer lists, because those are the kind of folks who need Jesus the most.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Marcy, usually when we talk about a book here on the podcast, we say, you can pick up your book. Not this one. Don't even
Maybe don't pick
don't
this one up.
even
No.
bother finding this stupid book, because it really
No,
is.
hey, but Watch Me Grow, I'm a Baby is the live action
Yes.
book. And so if you want a biologically sound one, which by the way is not promoting, it's not promoting, so don't you ever go get an abortion. It's just promoting the truth about life.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we should be doing to young ones, is we should be educating them on the truth about when life begins, and that life has value from the very first heartbeat, from that moment of fertilization, because it's true, and it's biologically and scientifically sound.
Yeah, well said. Nicole, thanks for joining us here on Dear Jane.
Thank you for having me.